Okay.
Okay, fine. We can start. Good evening and welcome, Arun Chaudhary, BA at Cornell University, MFA in filmmaking at New York University, joined in 2008 presidential campaign of Barack Obama as part of his media team, was responsible for capturing videos and so to document the candidate's journey across the US. And after Obama won the election, became the first official videographer of the White House, a position created especially for him, and created and launched the West Wing Week, first ever weekly online video diary telling the story of week's event of the president, but of his family, of his collaborators, of his team. And we will go through this in a while. Obviously, the idea of West Wing Week was to give the public a transparent and behind-the-scenes view of presidential life. Later became the creative director for the presidential campaign of Bernie Sanders, is the author of the first cameraman documenting the Obama presidency in real time. Let's start with a theme that I'm really interested in, that's artificial intelligence. I'm a bit in conflicts of interest because it's my work in some ways. I am an AI engineer.
Oh,
and so I'm going to ask you, how are election campaigns and political marketing management changing with artificial intelligence? We have already seen Donald Trump's use of it. Will there be others? How do you advocate for its use in your work? Which part of political communicator work is changing or will change first, in your opinion?
It could be that it will change politics, but first it has to be a real thing. It's currently not a real thing. I mean, I don't know the work that you do. Artificial intelligence seems like a very promising field, but generative AI seems to people who don't have a financial stake in it to be a scientific and research dead end. So whatever impact it has had on politics, it's already had. And most of that, I believe, was just novelty. So I think there was one election that was heavily influenced by artificial intelligence, and it was not the Donald Trump election. He has small and sometimes clever uses of AI which is what I still maybe would advocate for someone to do, like an image that can't exist. And it's like not real, and so you make it something ridiculous. Like him playing Journey like on the piano. If you've seen this one, and it is amazing how the White House official site just sort of pumps these out. But no, I want to give credit to a different authoritarian right strongman who was Prabowo in Indonesia. I don't know how much you followed that election, but it was this election just poised at the time as generative AI video was coming onto the market. And so they very cleverly did make a kind of chat GPT skin that you could look various things up. But most importantly, you could animate your own character who would look like a cartoon Prabowo to some extent to make a unique vertical video. And then with only a couple of clicks, post it yourself. I mean, we can now enable you to do that same thing in less time using Canva, or even using for TikTok, CapCut, or for Instagram edits. And also now this wouldn't have worked as well because the apps know when you're playing with the app and when you're not playing with the app. But still, this let ordinary people flood the internet with lots and lots of, and when I say vertical videos, I'm not just talking about the format. I mean TikTok, Instagram Reels, Facebook Stories and Reels, Twitter video, like anything that's a part of a doom scroll where you actually reach outside your bubble. So this was a way to kind of scale that spectacularly. And also this kind of rough AI thing really worked well with making him from, the former military strongman of the country into an adorable K-pop style cartoon character. But that being said, I think that the novelty of AI has worn off. I think the age range of people who, and I'm talking about video and picture generation now, has worn off. I think it's only boomers. We just saw in an Italian election, Zaya using AI. Did you see this with the,
yes.
The Veneto lion? And he's, this is sort of something a boomer could love in a way. And I think you see young people seeing, smelling, and rejecting AI. And kind of one of the new most embarrassing things, forget the videos, etc., like when you're caught having made a plan with ChatGPT and it has the 2 M dashes, right? Like everyone thought it was going to be kids cheating in school, but really the problem with ChatGPT is the teachers use it, not the kids. I think this is the same thing with the kind of forces of democracy. We're like, everyone's abusing this, so we better start abusing this. And you're like, other people are treating it as a toy, and that's really the way that you should too. And I'm starting to give a very long answer, but you're obviously very interested, so why not? I do think this kind of techno-utopianism is a sickness of the center left and not the world writ large. Like we used to in the US accuse the right wing and in Italy of using bots when they weren't using bots. They were using trolls. A troll is a real person. Sometimes they were even getting better than minimum wage to do the work that they're doing. We were the ones who were actually trying to make this automated and utopian and beautiful kind of technological system. Like in the US, it was David Brock, who's a kind of shady Democratic operative who's, done these things on behalf of Democrats. Not this, like Cambridge Analytica wasn't leading to like thousands of bots doing anything, that La Bestia, back when Salvini was a thing, and not this captured small man under Meloni. People used to wonder, what is the technology behind his brilliant social media? And it was just turned out to be 12 guys in Milan in a basement, getting a decent wage and eating pretty decent food and just actually posting a lot. So there may be a time where AI is interesting enough that I think it has a more impactful positioning on politics, but much like quantitative polling and other things, anyone who puts too much stock in a techno-utopian thing gets bad results, and the people who win elections tend to be much more transactional and street level.
Talking about data, you referred to Cambridge Analytica, and it was my second question. How is the effectiveness of a communication technique measured? So it must be complicated, I think, to decouple the various effects and to perform, for example, A/B testing. And about the case of Cambridge Analytica, what are your thoughts on this? So obviously with AI, natural language processing, it's not generative AI. It's possible to segment voters, classify them in order to...
Yeah, just automating some of these processes should not be confused with what Sam Altman is doing. Yeah.
So should we get used to election campaigns with tailor-made content?
No. This stuff doesn't work. It's like you make 1 million audiences and you target things 1 million. Like we have this again. This is an idea the center left has of what everyone in the world is doing. They think that that's what advertisers are doing. Cambridge Analytica was stealing everyone's data, and this is wrong. And they were collecting millions of pieces. What did they do with it? Nothing. What did they have? Some machine that then made people into Nazis with this information? No, it was too much information to even know what to do with. I am a very, very successful political operative. I would take a focus group even over a poll any day of the week, because when people are talking, I know who people are, I know who they are, I know where they're coming from, and I can use my own brain to do this. So I think a lot of things that we're trying to kind of replicate, like they don't, we need to know that they're working before we use them. There's a reason Hillary Clinton didn't win. Again, there's a reason Kamala Harris didn't win. Like they keep using these very outdated and usually techno-optimistic techniques to win. The things that are exciting, whether it's Zoran Mamdani's campaign or any other number of things, is usually it's decentralized. Usually it's organic. And usually it comes from many different accounts, which I guess is another way of seeing decentralized. So maybe I say decentralized twice, but it is almost always organic campaign. So you have this crazy world, and it's Cambridge Analytica, right? It's impressive because they're committing crime, so they go to jail. The U.S. political operatives were impressive because we spend lots of money, but like no one in any American campaign has done anything interesting in decades. If you want an interesting campaign, look at France, or a place where they only have organic content. Like that's interesting, So there is this kind of inferiority complex in European politics. I can, name any number of Italian politicians who all they want is to have their pictures taken with certain American politicians, But it's funny because I think Europe actually is doing much more advanced campaigning than Americans. It's why I moved to Europe. You know, like I could stay in America, but I wouldn't learn anything. People talk about the Mamdani campaign as if it was an innovative campaign. It was a great campaign because it had the courage to do what every person who knows anything about games has been advocating for forever, which is stop wasting money on some things, start doing other things. And this isn't like a left-right thing. You know, I'm throwing Hillary and Kamala under the bus, you know, right away, because, you know, as a leftist in my party, this is easy and fun to do. But actually, when it comes to like things,
I share completely everything you said.
You know, I know. It would be easy for us to do this. So let's also take a step back.
That's a commie meeting.
Yeah, we're the Politburo of this one. But to show that there's actually a bigger connection in the campaign style, say, of Barack Obama and Zoran's campaign than between Bernie's. And this is a different flavor of techno-optimism, but this is what I blame. And I hate to be making you the victim of my tirade on this, because I don't often talk about this. You know, you're the one who's asking. But it again revolves around this techno-optimism. Yeah. So on the Obama campaign, famously, you had lots of volunteers. And what do volunteers need? They need personal management. Volunteers are the most powerful and most dangerous thing in a campaign. Most powerful because someone who's not even being paid, who is an actual advocate and worker of the campaign. The scary thing is you have someone working for the campaign who represents the campaign, who you don't know who they are. You know, they're probably a little crazy. Why do they have all this time to give to you? Normal people certainly don't. You know, one of the similar things, and I was one of the few staff to work in both Obama and Bernie, but we had the same people joining up, people who didn't like moderate Democrats. You know, like that's who was, both times people didn't like Hillary Clinton, right? So we had very similar kind of clientele. Like not all of them you want talking to other voters. You know, so like Americans also, we really lionize this idea of knocking on doors and stuff. What could be worse than sending like someone with blue hair and a nose ring to talk about socialism at a doorstep of a person who's not so sure? What could remind them that there's an election that they should vote against Bernie Sanders better than this?
It remembers me, Boy Scouts selling biscuits, something like this.
Yeah. You can really do damage if you don't know what you're doing. The Obama campaign had a lot of volunteers, but had a lot of community organizers, of course, because this is his background specifically. You know, but for every 20 people, for every 15 people, there's someone keeping track of all of them, making sure they know what to do. The Mamdani campaign was similar, and with digital, you have more opportunities. Hey, you've got a great personality for our commenting program. You know, like, why don't you put comments on the New York Times website, you know, for us? You can sort of arrange these things, make your door knocking more professional, put the right people talking in. The opposite was done in the Bernie campaign. And then Beto O'Rourke and some of this, you know, if you've ever read like Rules for Revolutionaries or any of these things, it's this idea that like volunteers train volunteers who use systems that get even bigger and bigger. And this just creates chaos. You're making lots of conversations, but are they high quality conversations? Are you turning out the wrong voters? Yes. Are you allowing your enemy to use your tools? Yes. You know, are you creating systems that are sometimes illegal? Yes. Is it expensive because even like the 1 cent you're paying per thing when you're just multiplying these bad conversations? Yes. So I just bristle against whether it's, you know, people using AI, whatever, all the technological, like optimistic things where it's like, this is going to stop us from having to do the work is never true. All the technology that works always helps you to a certain degree, do what you're already doing and do it better. Do I think those things will happen? Absolutely. Could I imagine even AI being able to kind of, you know, troll through neighborhoods to find out where you might want to be like talking to people? So yeah, probably could probably figure some of these things out. But whenever there's a technological advance on this stuff, it always eats up the amount of time it takes even to use it. Like there's probably a name for it or whatever, but every technological advance designed to make women do less labor in the kitchen, you know, throughout, you know, time, has just essentially been a tool of a patriarchy just to make women have more things to do, right? Just because the washed or cooking takes less time doesn't mean we're still not going to waste your time full of bullshit because we would like to make sure like half the population is like in unpaid labor. It's still going to be that way. And I think that's the situation we find ourselves in with a lot of this. So as you, the campaigner, save your time by having this machine cut turf instead of you, that means you're going to spend twice as much time arguing about which doors it meant for you to knock on when you're out there in the field.
It's clear. You mentioned Mamdani, 34, first Muslim mayor from an immigrant family in New York.
With that damn smile, too. What a handsome fella.
Yes. Enormous complexity with a lot of inequalities, and his promises were very ambitious. And so it's natural that there is skepticism about their implementation. Rent controls, free services, higher taxes on the wealthy, on businesses. And it's also widely discussed in Europe. Do you think that it could inspire more progressive urban models, even for European left, and it should be a concern for Donald Trump? And what are your thoughts on their first meeting, in which Trump surprised many, treating him
very different questions, yeah,
but showing him to be in a dominant position? And what worked in his...
You think Trump looked like he was in a dominant position?
I think so.
Because he was sitting and Mamdani was standing?
Yes, I had this vibe. I may be wrong. I'm not...
To me, it felt like a win-win for both of them. You know, also like he like literally redecorated the office before Zoran got there, like it was a date, you know? So like the power imbalance to me isn't totally clear, but let's talk about that second. First, you asked about Mamdani's ambitious program, free buses, rent freeze, you know, supermarkets that can compete
not
with
so easy
price gouging, like this is big stuff. I do think a sort of really unfortunate sickness of the center left is social democrats generally is an addiction to governing, and as a byproduct of the addiction to governing, an ability to only want to run on the things you think you can deliver. You're like, we said we do these 6 things, we did these 4 of them, that's what we're going to run on. And hopefully that's enough. And if you're the Portuguese socialists and you're actually doing a lot of things for, you know, a decade or more, yeah, you have a pretty good string of elections, you know. But this kind of thing works up until it doesn't work. So I think it's more important than to deliver on what you promised is to promise the things that you really believe in and that you want to fight for, not the things that you think you can deliver on. To me, it's a much more a question of ideology than it is actually about governance. And so Zoran, I think, should not back down on any of those things, should be seen to be fighting for them. And then when he can't get them, should be super clear with people why, and actually not be afraid to name the real enemies. I think you have too many in America, certainly in the PD, for instance, and but any kind of center-left party is too beholden to entrenched financial interests to ever really attack them. And I think Zoran is not. So we'll be able to say, oh, you can't have these things because A, B, and C has been done by rich people. We haven't had a politician who said this for a long time. The last one we had who said this, you could say Bernie, but Bernie has never been in a position of like real power, as Zoran will be. I would say is actually FDR, who used to very gleefully make speeches not only about the people who were his friends and he wanted to help, but the people who were his enemies and why. Famously, he said in a State of the Union, I welcome their hatred. Like these are the men who helped me and I welcome their hatred. I think these kinds of politics work when you are actually fighting for things that people have given you a mandate that they want. So will he get it right away? I don't know. City politics is very tough. New York City politics specifically is very sort of Byzantine, very tough. But I do think that he can be a mayor who is around for long enough through his charm, charisma, communication skills, discipline, hard work, to get some of these things done by reminding people why they haven't gotten done yet. And it's not because of his lack of his will or for lack of will of the voters. Those two things together, maybe it's naive. I still think it can make something happen. Oh, and then with Trump. No, let me talk about Trump then. So I don't think this is that much of a worry to Trump specifically because Trump actually doesn't really have an ideology. He's a nihilist, So like is space luxury communism going to work in New York City? He doesn't actually care. It doesn't bother him either way. But forget that. Let's say he does have more of a populist Republican ideology, Trumpism as we understand it. Let's say that he's very firmly entrenched in that. Still, his alliance with Mamdani, which I do think is more an alliance of equals. I think it probably started with Zoran saying, "Hey, you and me were the two best politicians in New York, right? Nobody wanted you to be president. Nobody wanted me to be mayor. Here we are." Good manners don't cost you nothing. I think that Trump would find that irresistible. But I think both of them, it's a win-win for them because it represents the failure of traditional establishment politics on both sides. So that is, to Zoran, a liberal democratic establishment that is indistinguishable from the financially beholden Republican interests. And for Donald Trump, that is, a Republican Party, that is the deep state, that is whatever. And so Zoran being ascendant in the Democratic Party, to him is helpful because it sort of breaks up the people who are keeping him from making deeper roads into the Democrats, makes them more ideologically pure in the way that he knows how to run against. And there's no downside for him on that. There's also now no downside for Mamdani on that for the same reasons, actually. But there's plenty of people who Trump pisses off when he does that, when he's hanging out with Mamdani. And some of them may actually end up getting pried loose from his new Republican Party and look for something different. So there is peril there for both of them, but no, I think it's correct. Unless you believe the establishment is about to strike back in some big way. I mean, we were talking about France before. This would be like, are the socialists and the Republicans ever going to be the major parties in France anymore? Sure doesn't look like it. And everyone is sort of waiting for them to snap back in place is probably waiting for nothing. It's every 40 or 50 years in America, the parties realign. We're going to see that we're overdue by a little bit. It's like about 50 now since the Southern strategy, kind of took everybody by surprise. There's going to be some kind of realignment because traditional political parties don't work.
It's clear you were talking about Donald Trump, and I wanted to introduce the theme of peace. Did Trump take over the issue of peace primarily because it was left to him by Europe, or maybe by his predecessor Biden?
I'm the wrong guy. I'm the wrong guy to ask this, or I'm the right guy. I would say because I'm a peace voter, in a way. I'm quite left. I'm not a member of the Democratic Party. The only reason I joined was because Barack Obama had this very strong mandate against the Iraq War. This occurred to me as a very smart reason to actually work for a candidate. I was like, the guy's promising to stop a war. When people are so flabbergasted about all these people who voted for Obama, maybe even first-time voters in a place like Iowa, who then switched to Trump, to me, it's not perplexing at all because they are either isolationists or peace voters. You call them one if they're left and one if they're right. But I think there's a very large segment of Americans who feel very left behind by the national security state. This is our sin as a country. Every country is captured by an industry. Ours is the military industrial complex. The richest counties in America aren't in New York or California or even in oil fields in Texas. They're actually the ring of counties that go around Washington, D.C. because it's where people who make weapons live. And that's actually, business is good. If you make weapons, business is pretty good. And so they do have an undue influence on both the Republicans and the Democrats. That basically we are captured in this way. And this was a big appeal of Trump, especially in 2016, before he did, do things like bomb Iran, all these other stuff, that he was someone who was going to offer up peace. Now, I think this is a little bit of Bannon, a little bit of, run faux progressive, run to the left of the Democrats. But when I said you're the wrong guy, I'm the wrong guy to ask. I'm the wrong guy to ask because I actually, I watch a lot of Trump. I'm a Trumpologist. I've seen almost every rally the guy did when he was running for things. I was probably the first person who wasn't right-wing to see he'd gotten shot because I was watching the little live stream that was covering this, just because I watched all of them. And I think Trump is an absolute nihilist. He doesn't believe much, but he believes a couple of things. He does hate immigrants. He doesn't understand why they come here.
That's one thing.
He doesn't know why we pay for them. He really doesn't get it. He thinks these countries are shithole countries. Why would we take someone from a shithole? Like, why would we do that? That's crazy. Like, you know, it's almost like something in the movie Roger and Me. If you've ever seen it, a great movie about Michigan, there's this deputy whose job it is to kick people out of their houses when they can't afford it anymore. It's obviously like a terrible job, Deputy Fred. And he's always telling these women, he's like, you just married some poor guy. You don't need help being poor. You know, like, why did you get help to be poor? It's like, I think he thinks that. He's like, a country's having a hard time. We don't need more poor people to make us more poor. That's like, he's not right. That's not how the world works. That's how the economy works. But he thinks that. I think he also hates war for the same reasons. He thinks it's like wasteful. He thinks it's sort of gross, you know, the way that he's sort of germophobic.
Not good for business, maybe.
The way, no, I don't. Yeah, sure. I don't think that. Listen to the way he talks about it. When he talks about the war with Ukraine and Russia, like he, you know, seems to love Putin or whatever, but he'll be like, it's war is terrible and these beautiful kids are being killed. Like he'll describe, you know, like these beautiful kids. We see it's like terrible. You know, he thinks they're more beautiful than the Gazan kids because they're a little whiter. It's all right. But like, you know, he's really affected by it. And I'm not here to like advocate for Donald Trump. I'm just saying, like, I think he actually does believe this, and that's why he's fixated on it. And especially with people giving him a little bit of praise as the peacemaker now, he's going all in on it. I should find it. There is this clip where there was some reporter asking about why he didn't fire some certain grade of missile at Syria or something. This was a while back. This was the first term. And his answer, I will never forget. He was like, you're talking about missiles. You're sick. You're talking about this thing like it's a toy. Like these things kill people. They're disgusting. Like, you know, you know, don't say it like that. You know, and I was like, wow, if you were anyone else other than Donald Trump, I would actually be very moved by that statement. But I actually think that is from his heart, where he's like, what the hell are you talking about? You know, like deciding to use the lesser thing is obviously always better. I think he's generally an anti-death guy, but he's a nihilist who doesn't think about how it comes about. So I think his peace is more genuine than his desire for peace might be more genuine than we think, but his efforts as a narcissist to put his name on everything like it's a building he owns. So like some Congolese peace process, oh, I did peace here, I did peace there. That's all bullshit. But his actual desire that maybe this is the way I get into heaven is by actually telling people how bad war is. I think he thinks that in his soul. And I think some of these other assholes take advantage of that. I think Bibi and Putin and all, I think they know how to manipulate. He's not the smartest guy, our president. I think they know how to like say the right things, even along those lines of, you know, I hate having to kill all these kids and you can help me stop if I can. I think they know how to manipulate him.
So it is peculiar that the right is occupying the issue of peace that once belonged to left. And about Donald Trump, talking about something.
But this was 2016, and I'm glad you're mentioning it because people don't ever mention this. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump swapped positions on everything, not just peace, also on free trade, on protectionism, on anything anyone cared about. Both the Democrats and Republicans swapped position, and this wasn't interesting to merit an opinion piece in the New York Times. This wasn't interesting enough to have anyone talk about it on CNN. Why? Like, because there is something non-ideological in the politics that were being sold.
They gained coherence with their colors in Europe, since red is for left in Europe and blue for right.
Yeah.
Talking about something that could weaken Donald Trump, I'm thinking about the Epstein files.
Oh yeah.
That they could be really weaken his support, and there is even a parallelism in some ways with the history of Silvio Berlusconi. And as some analysts say, is there something in Trump's communication of Berlusconi's communication? And isn't there a contradiction not only in the United States with the MAGA movement, which is very uncompromising, and this is personal misconduct? Since even Berlusconi didn't lose consensus because of the scandals, because of corruptions, but because of the sexual scandals involving minors.
Yeah. And there you do have
Ruby. The, nie- the,
Yes,
the
Ruby
niece,
the heart stealer.
the niece of the former Egypt President Mubarak. She is from Morocco, but niece of the president.
I remember this scandal. No, this was crazy. I also think Berlusconi is able to get away with it for longer because he was able to get away with crazier stuff for longer. He had kind of like lower burning scandals that went on. Number one, because of the Italian legal system, which is its own kettle of fish, but also because I think of Catholicism. There's a little bit more forgiveness built into it. MAGA is a fundamentally Protestant like feel, where it is anger and purity and like, you know, and self-responsibility and these. So I do think you have. It's interesting because MAGA is even more like that than evangelical Protestants. So you have them, and they're still willing to forgive Trump for infidelity and for porn star stuff. The Christians stick with them. You know, it's like abortions. We like this. You know, God will forgive you in the end. Who knows? But Marjorie Taylor Greene won't. Right? Like, you know, the real hardcore MAGA ones are the ones who are super unforgiving. And yeah, Trump is utterly flexible. And unlike someone like Putin who has only built his thing on a kind of transactionary, even criminal nature, Trump has built his on some ideology, or rather on Steve Bannon's ideology, because Trump never really had ideology, right? So being like, oh, okay, this kind of, you know, smash the state and, you know, give the people back what they want and stop the elites. And the Epstein thing runs right into that. And this is definitely damaging. It has been damaging. It's made him have to break with people who he hasn't broke with anything over else. It's why, in a way, even on other issues, his coalition is, you know, withering down to what it used to be, rather than to this sort of supermajority he had somehow kind of artificially created. Now, what's in there? We don't know. Who has it hurt so far? Democrats. The Princess of Sweden, I was reading today. I don't know if you were following this. She's all over it. So, like, she's not allowed to go to the Nobel Prize thing now.
English royal family, British royal family.
But yeah, Andrew, the ambassador who's best friends with Tony Blair, and in the U.S., Obama's economic advisor, Larry Summers. This does seem to be hitting Democrats as bad as it's hitting Republicans. We know Bill Clinton is balls deep in this whole thing because he is, you know, sort of very clearly a violent sexual assaulter of people, like, already. And so this is the problem generally with, I don't know how big I can say this, because this is the massive problem. This is what's wrong writ large, is that we're like, if only the Epstein files would come out, then everything would be good because all the bad people are in there. And you're like, you are the fucking bad people. What are you talking about? You're the bad people. You know, like, we have a communication strategy, the pro-democratic, anti-autocratic force, whatever you want to call everyone, the anti-fascists, that assumes that people think that they're the bad guys and they're the good guys, and that we're the normal ones and that they're the weird ones. And we actually make content assuming this. And that is not true. And that has not been true for a long time. So I can give you two examples from the US election, from the Harris campaign. You had this famous ad that Julia Roberts does the voicing of. She didn't write it or anything. I don't mean to, I'm not like throwing her under the bus, although I think she's maybe overrated as an actress. Which was whatever happens in the booth stays in the booth. And it's these two sort of MAGA-coated women with these hats and their husbands. And it's like, nobody has to know who you vote for. And they vote for Kamala Harris, and they come out, and the husband's like, who'd you vote for? And they're like, we voted the right way. And it's like, great. That ad is a backfire. That ad only works if people are more scared of their husbands than they are of being yelled at online by, like, angry Kamala supporters. And that's not the case. Right? They're actually more scared of the other way. And so that ad was a reminder that you can vote for Donald Trump and tell everyone you voted for Kamala. You know, and you can tell all your goals.
We had something similar with the Communist Italian Party. God is watching you, so do not vote for Communist Party.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, another good example of backfire would be that techno remix of the Io Sono Giorgia speech. You know, they're like, oh, we're going to make fun of her. And you're like, you're literally just saying her message over and over again. There was another one from about Project 2025 from CAP through the party, through Kamala's official campaign. That was like, Donald Trump's back and he wants revenge and he's out for control and he has a plan. It has a name. It's 900 pages long. And you're like, when are we going to get to the bad stuff? Like, everyone's just assuming that this must be super bad. And if you're not assuming that, and so when we think of the Epstein files, we're like, oh yeah, all the creeps he's friends with must mostly be these horrible Republicans. The answer is like, no, probably it's exactly equal both ways. But since people expect it less from one side, they may end up getting the worst side of this. Now, the question is exactly how Donald Trump is or isn't in it. And this is, you know, up for debate. I'm actually someone who thinks that he is slightly embarrassed about something that's in there and is overreacting about it in a way that his team didn't even like. But I have no real proof of this, other than people who had seen the files kept saying that they were going to release them, because I think they like looked, they were like, this is fine, let's release it. And Trump's like, no, 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 no. Which does lend the idea that maybe it's not really about him and that maybe he is actually looking out for someone else. That does seem more awkward. And he is awkward about it. If it was just him, he would figure out what to say. He'd be like, yeah, I don't know. You know, like he's gotten caught violently raping a woman. You know, he's gotten caught paying off porn stars and has had better answers for it. I don't want to get too bogged down on Epstein, but I do think like, yeah, there's some of these things about it. Like I don't think it's going to be a silver bullet, but we'll see. It's going to drip out between now and March. They're not going to put it all at once. So we can all enjoy. It's the only thing that's doing anything so far. And I do think that is, as you say, this lack of trust between the MAGA deep state haters and him not releasing this, that is making them take harder stances on Israel, making harder stances on economic and healthcare policies. I think Epstein files gives them the permission with their voters to do that. And so in that way, it's almost a leading issue, even if it's not what it seems like it's on the front of people's minds. It's an issue of trust.
You mentioned Giorgia Meloni's slogan that is really famous. I'm Georgia, I'm a mother, I'm a Christian.
Christiana, yeah.
Yes. The contradiction here is that they support traditional family, but none of them actually have one. Giorgia Meloni doesn't, her staff, her collaborators don't. And about the relationship between Europe and Trump, and in general Europe and Donald Trump. Europe constantly seems to be under Donald Trump's friendly fire, sanctions, tariffs on Europe exports. And it came to my mind the phrase of Victoria Nuland of 10 years ago, fuck the EU. Has this always been the plan, the United States agenda, and has Trump merely lifted the veil of hypocrisy, in your opinion?
Yeah. Donald Trump doesn't care what, you know, can bully the EU into doing things he wants. Barack Obama knows the EU will just back up whatever it is that he wants if he like pretends to let them have their way enough on it. The United States does not respect Europe as an independent power, and Europe doesn't use the power that it has to change that story. You know, like Europe has everyone wants someone to regulate tech. Europe is the protagonist there, not America. Europe is the one that should do it. But then Ursula von der Leyen gave the whole store away already in the trade negotiations. Like, Europe just does not act seriously when it comes to kind of exercising power on the world stage. You know, like the war in Gaza happens that you literally have Ursula von der Leyen and what's his name? The foreign one, Borrell, giving contradictory statements. No one takes this seriously. Ursula
von der Leyen is not taken seriously, even in some moves, in some with some in some ways by other leaders. They underline it.
Like, so the EU has to seem like a more serious political project and, like, you know, fight the battles that it can win. So, like, yeah, you want to rearm, fine. So, like, in 10 years, you're going to be able to, like, fight some defensive. But that's fine. Maybe it's even important. I would be someone who suggests that it's probably important to do. But That's not exercising the power that you have now in the immediate moment. And Europe does not do this. Europe is very much passive and wants to be in the picture. You know, the European politicians will rather be in Kyiv with a picture wearing an army helmet, like, you know, doing something like this, than actually exercise the power the EU has, which is like, yeah, being in a boring room saying like, I don't know, we might actually make a European alternative to Facebook that is nationalized because we don't like what you're doing with that. You know, something that actually is threatening, something that actually
even on cloud, on social medias, on artificial intelligence, everything.
GDPR is a good example. GDPR should be something that is used by a weapon by Europe, saying, you know what, we don't even want to have like any kind of internet relations with your country if you don't also have GDPR, because we know, like, you know, how the internet works. It's not a big deal. GDPR turned out to work beautifully. It was the system everyone thought would destroy the world. It hasn't destroyed anything. People still have newsletters. People still do advertising. Everything works fine. So actually, this should be something the EU should be dicks about. No, this is the way we do things, and everyone should do it this way, actually.
And so obviously in last presidential elections, Democratic Party suffered a heavy defeat.
Sí.
Biden was initially the candidate for the Democrats, showing signs of weakness due to his age, mainly, I think. And he was then replaced by Kamala Harris and had the familiar difficulties upon taking over. What were the errors of Kamala Harris' campaign, if we can keep it in a few minutes? And the midterms will be held in 2026, and they could reduce Trump's power. Democrats appear to be ahead in the House of Representatives, while Republicans should
keep the Senate.
Control the Senate. What are your predictions, and what factors will determine the outcome of midterms?
Those are my predictions. Democrats should take the House back narrowly. It'll be tougher than it should be because of some redistricting, and also because Biden did really well in his midterms. And that's sort of like a tax. You have to pay it eventually. Like, you already did as good as you could do. Doing a little bit better, every little bit better you do is so much harder than when you do poorly and you're coming back. You know, like, you know, each extra vote is harder and harder. But what should we expect generally? Look, I think the Harris campaign was a terrible campaign. Anyone who says it was too short is just full of crap. You know, if it had been longer, she would have lost by more. Why? Because she's a terrible candidate. She is bad at running for things. She's never been particularly good at it. She has been lauded for like not particularly good reasons, a lot of them demographic. She consistently has won by pleasing donors over voters. So she has always run to the right of everyone in California she's ever worked against. She's always been the conservative establishment candidate against a progressive in every campaign she's ever run until 2020, in which she was destined to get so few votes and come in 5th in her home state of California that she dropped out embarrassedly. So obviously you're asked to be vice president, you should choose to be vice president. And if you're supposed to run, you should run. But no one should be under any illusions that this person had ever demonstrated particularly good judgment politically. Given the second most important job in the country, was seen mostly to be ducking responsibilities, you know, firing a lot of staff. So anyway, I think she's a disaster to begin with. And then Democrats ran one of the worst ideas of a campaign I can even begin to think of. There is not a company anywhere on earth, forget a political campaign, there's not a company anywhere on earth that is investing heavier in television than in digital advertising now. And yet the Harris campaign decided to spend a higher percentage on TV than even the Biden campaign had in 2020, when people were literally trapped in their houses because of COVID. That's insanity. You have a lot of Obama people now sort of complaining about the Harris campaign. It was pretty much taken over by Obama people and run like a 2008 Obama campaign. It's 2024. You can't run that kind of campaign. Like, do you remember the video of Obama endorsing her? It was like, oh, like a pretend phone call. Again, that was cutting edge when I did it for him in 2008. I would never suggest that a candidate does that anymore. Like, are you kidding me? So this was a bad campaign run badly with an untalented candidate. And when you're an untalented candidate, you have to be humble and do lots of stuff and be seen to fuck up a lot. And actually, Joe Biden's a bit like that. You know, before he was like too old to do it, he doesn't speak well And so he would say so much stuff that the 10% he got wrong didn't matter. But when you have to wait 2 weeks for Kamala to do her first real interview, there's no way to do a good job on that. So the kind of, this, they have this, so the caution, the kind of traditional, and a lot of this is why, I've told you before, why Americans don't run good campaigns and why people should stop studying them. Do you know the most important person on any presidential campaign is not the campaign manager? That's the second most important person. First most important person, TV consultant. The person whose job it is to write the TV ads, do the polling that says what they should be, and then decides how much money you spend where. They don't get paid. They just get a percentage of the ad buy you spend on TV. So if you're spending $500 million on TV and they're getting 10 or 15% of that, you do the math, And, that's how they run all their companies, how they do, so Joe Biden's TV consultant is the guy in the end who's not letting him see the polling. You know what I mean? Like all of these things. And so we really have a broken politics that revolves just around spending money in which people would rather lose elections, right? And don't tell Joe Biden he's too old to run. They would rather lose elections than actually reform the way the campaign is run. The Mamdani campaign, again, is not an innovative campaign. And I don't mean this in a nasty way. These are the best people. I love them so much. But it's that they were brave enough to do all the things we all know work. A decentralized, ideologically driven, don't be afraid to call out the companies, kind of campaign that stays focused on what people want. Kamala Harris can't run that campaign, not because she doesn't know how, because that's not the campaign they want to run. They have to do that's something that's driven on something else because they aren't able to run on the ideology.
It's clear. And do you believe that a new credible leadership will emerge in the American Democratic Party? And do you have some ideas about someone specifically?
I should say I'm not a Democrat. I'm an independent. And no one in the Democrat, but I've worked for many Democratic candidates. I have famously helped some of the best of them, created new positions, new ways of campaigning. No one in the Democratic Party has ever asked me why I'm not a Democrat and what it would take for me to join. So I have a pretty low opinion of the party. And I don't know that I think it deserves to continue to exist but I think it probably will to some extent. Where do I get the most excited, though, about things that are happening in various parts of the Democratic Party? I will tell you, it's exciting to see somebody do well in New York City, but there's a lot of elections you don't see all the time that I think are more interesting, which are in like the deep South, Mississippi, Alabama, cities like Jackson and Birmingham, where you see multiracial working class coalitions sort of demanding things and running in a really pragmatic way because there is no party. No one's telling them what they can do. They have no chance of winning. And so there's nobody saying, hey, you can't say that. Hey, you can't do that. And then all of a sudden they win here and there. You see a mayor here. You see a city councilman here. Keep your eye on that spot because I think Democrats have farther to fall down. But it doesn't mean that Republicans should be the beneficiary of it. I think you're going to see more local people picking up the slack, making impromptu alliances, and not just there. One of the coolest things I saw happen last week, I'm not sure if you saw this. I feel really lucky I saw the tweet go by because everyone I mentioned to hasn't seen it. In the UK, all we see, and deservedly with a fucking guy like Keir Starmer, who again is just selling the right wing's policies a little bit watered down and wondering why no one wants to drink it, you see them losing by-election after by-election spectacularly to reform. And even with the Greens doing better and some other interesting things, like that doesn't get the kind of support you can get to beat 34 points for Farage's gang, right? But there, I think it was called Broxton. They were like, Broxton Alliance wins. I was like, what the fuck is the Broxton Alliance? It turned out a bunch of left and Greens joined with a bunch of people quitting Labor and said, what if we were just a generic left party running on progressive stuff and didn't have any of the baggage of all these other things? And they beat Farage convincingly, while Labor was reduced to like 4 points or something, right? So the will of the people is there. It's just not all of our political parties are designed to get them there. So you could imagine in a place like the US, which is so big, regional alliances. like a Mississippi kind of Democratic Party that's independent of the Democratic Party. This is the story to why Modi didn't do so well in India this time, which is that for the first time you had the National Congress Party actually working in a smart alliance with the regional progressive parties to say, hey, let's not overcompete in places where we're, if we both don't win in the first round, let's only send a unified candidate, which, by the way, is, of course, the secret of the Popular Front in France and why they had such a convincing win in 2023 in the summer, was they actually did manage to even get a lot of Macron politicians to agree to let's not double compete when it comes to fighting the far right in the second rounds. So I could really imagine in the US some more of these coalition politics kind of coming together where you do have a state progressive party that represents a smaller amount of people around a more specific set of ideas, being able to ally with national parties and gain new electoral majorities in places people aren't imagining. Maybe that's optimistic and utopian, who knows?
Yeah, for us, yes, absolutely. And you were mentioning it before, but what are the main differences between election campaigns in Europe, even if there is no uniformity, or is there, compared to those in the United States? You have experience with both, obviously.
There aren't that many differences except for the laws, like the big difference in the law being in the US. Forget GDPR, we have this thing called the voter file, which literally, when you have a voter file, like, you're a nice Italian, you've hired some political operative, they find out you don't have a voter file, they literally can't help you. Now they're just pretending and they're looking nervous in your office because it's a way they can look up who's voted and actually automate all of these things that will be very, very illegal in Europe. So that's very different. The scale of money people spend is different, but actually some of the things are very similar. So in the US, we don't really have a centralized party who does things, but you don't in Italy either, right? Correntes are as important as, when it comes to helping you out as your national party, et cetera, et cetera. But there is an attitude. The money helps campaigns in the US work full year round. So they're always campaigning on things. And then when you don't have votes to ask for, you're just sort of, increasing on your issues, especially the right wing. And in Europe, only the right wing does this. So they are, campaigning against censorship, against migration, against crime all year long. And you do have the progressive parties working elections and taking the rest of the time off. And sometimes they all have other jobs and they're volunteering and they're this and that and the other thing. And this is a big difference in which it's sort of hard to overcome, because by any stretch of the plans that I make for someone who's running for something, I say that the election is a clown show. It's let me just really quickly describe the phenomenon to you. The right wing sells elections like Americans sell cars. So that's 3 levels. You have a national brand identity, for not even a car. I just see dust in the desert and I hear a guitar play and there's an eagle screaming and I'm like, oh, that's how I feel. I feel like a Ford truck. That's how I feel. And then you have a regional message that's more practical. We have a minivan that's so big it can fit 2 trucks inside of it. Oh my God, I need to get one of those. And then you have a person in a clown suit with a sign that lights up that rotates around and come into the store. And you're thinking, how could someone pick something as important as a car, this expensive thing, based on the clown? And the answer is the clown just has to get you to walk in the store. You already know you need the minivan because you know how much it costs and what it does. And if you're going to buy a minivan, you feel like the Ford, so you're going to get the Ford. And that clown show is the election. Whether the clown is Donald Trump or Silvio Berlusconi or Milei or whoever it is, that's the clown. And they just get you to walk in the booth. You already have been told for years that you have a right to work, so fuck the union, or that you deserve a tax break, because everyone else is just wasting your money. It's just going to go to migrants or whatever. And then who's the person offering that. So if you make it into the booth knowing you're looking for tax cuts, you're going to end up voting for Donald Trump. And this is the story. And so if we're only participating in the clown show, then politics is going to feel very strange and weird. But if we're willing to have conversations outside of that with no call to action, not and now vote for me, just I wanted you to know, that's an important part of politics that's missing from most of progressive Europeans' schedules.
Getting in Italy, you worked with the Italian Democratic Party leader Elly Schlein. She volunteered for Obama's presidential campaign. Do you think she will be the center-left candidate for prime minister? And she is often criticized for her communication skills. Do you think there's something she needs to improve on? And what should she do to beat Giorgia Meloni in 2027?
I think she needs more digital intimacy. I think she has time now maybe to work on that a bit. But, you know, Giorgia Meloni is a natural of just sort of creating, you know, this space between you and her on there. I think Elly has inherited such a mess of a party. You know, no offense to anyone in your audience in the party. But that up until now, she's had to sort of get the chessboard in order. You know, like who's going to do what are they, you know, the regional elections, who's going to be on these lists, how are we going to fight? But there is one thing that she's been very successful at, that is this political thing, which is one by one, really being relentlessly inclusive with everyone she needs to become the someone who can command a progressive majority in Italy, which is not easy against Giorgia Meloni. So that has to go everywhere to the left of Carlo Calenda and all the way to the left of the communists, right? Like everybody except for Carlo himself. Then that's a winning majority. This would actually be easy if it was just Renzi and these assholes. You know what I mean? Like they, you know, it's political pragmatism.
They wanted to. For example, Calenda doesn't.
Yeah. Calenda doesn't want, but Renzi does. So that's why I think you see him playing ball now. The problem is Cinque Stelle. So she has an impossible situation in which there is an easy progressive majority in the whole country if these things get together, but they've also decided they would all rather die than make that happen, you know? And in this, I think the thing that she gets criticized from inside the party, or the reason sometimes she is, even if they don't admit it, is people hate that she always is respectful to their voters, always reaches out to them every time. How can you do that? These people are anti-migrant. How can you do that? These people had, you know, were in the government La Lega. How can you do that? How can you do that? Because that's the only way it's going to work. Like, do the fucking math. And so I do think this relentless inclusivity, when it becomes time to be like, I want to show you the only plan there is to win, becomes effective. But right now, people just see it as, what's your problem? We want you to be like more pure on the things that we care about. But for me, it's actually quite smart. Whether she can communicate that, that's very hard, because you're talking about different US versus Europe. Forget that. Let's talk about Europe versus Europe, right? Like every country is a little different in the ways they do things. Tactical voting is not popular in Italy. It's popular very few places. I would say, like, you know, the UK, Australia, these Anglo places, a little bit more like, oh, you vote for the Lib Dems here, and then somehow, you know, like, but like other places, you want me to do what? You know, vote for a party I don't like to get a result you think I will like? Like, no. And especially in Italy, where people even pass down their voting patterns from parents to kids. This is not the right way to do it. So I think she really has a tough sell, but I think making winning part of the argument is something I haven't heard the progressives do in Italy for a while. No, guys, this is how we win, rather than this is how we're superior. And I think people are sick of losing in the right way. That being said, I've worked in many, many elections, and I think Giorgia Meloni is the most talented politician I've ever worked against. I think she is sort of uniquely this perfect little alien creature.
Even most solid amongst the European leaders. And about there are some ambiguities. If there is one word that describes the Italian foreign policy in 20th century, is ambiguity. It applies to both words. But Giorgia Meloni maintains certain ambiguities between Europeanism and Atlanticism. She would like to act as a bridge between the United States and Europe. Besides the fact that that's ridiculous, is there still a bridge, and is a position that can be considered credible by European partners?
I don't know if it'll be considered credible. Is Donald Trump's foreign policy credible? I mean, I think Georgia is better at selling Donald Trump's foreign policy than he is, but which is this ambiguous, like,
no, we're not against Ukraine, but don't make me like help them. Actually, like I do think like, you know, she learned that by watching him, kind of, right? What she's hasn't Italy is sort of not participating but not hurting, and Georgia around the world is she's not as bad as we thought she was going to be, actually, you know, only because she isn't kind of stepping on this one, you know, military thing. So I think in that way, she has been this sort of role model in an anti-Orban way, how to be a fascist without being a dick about it. You know, this kind of more light model. But that being said, there's a price to pay at some point for disengagement from the world, and she's not figuring out new and more creative ways to engage with it. And Italy needs to figure this out, right? The country's literally emptying out. If Italy imposed a United States style moratorium on immigration, the country would be fucked within like 5 years, right? Like the US could limp along without migrants for a little while, a decade or something. Like Italy, it's like there's no food, there's nothing happening, there's no, you know, crafts being made. Like it's like, you know, it would grind things down to a halt really fast. And so Georgia has to kind of maintain these levels of ambiguity on this stuff because she actually can't afford the things that she wants.
And so you were mentioning the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. So obviously the ongoing wars, this conflict and the genocide in Gaza are at the forefront of media agenda. Europe is rearming, is increasing military spending up to the 5% of the GDP, the Italian PIL. And in Italy, there's talk of reintroducing military conscription. Already 3 years ago, the former prime minister, with an unfortunate comment, said, "Do we prefer peace or air conditioning?" So referring to Russian gas, which is cheaper and of higher quality than US gas. And just to name 2 examples, so how have the ongoing wars influenced the political communication before and after the election? And another side of the thing is that invaded peoples of Ukraine and the Gaza Strip are constantly competing for the world's attention. The news on one side divert the attention, therefore even the aids from the other. So what's the analysis that you do of public opinion when it's inundated with this information on the ongoing conflicts?
I mean, this last thing is hard, right? We're, you know, in an attention economy, and we're constantly doing more and more of that. I do think that tech regulation, not to be a broken record, is the only answer to this attention economy. There's only some technique that people can do to get more people looking at their conflict footage, right? Like for the Gaza people, it's everything except for reverse psychology. They tried everything except for being like, nobody cares about Gaza, no one should. And people are like, what do you mean? And then being like, just kidding, we care. Like they've done everything except for that. You have unlikely messengers and Ms. Rachel. You have like, you know, whatever you have, you have all of that. We're just reaching a point where people are so saturated with content that it's really hard to make them feel anything. And this is a problem of regulation. We're just like eating food that is so unnutritious that we don't even know what it is anymore. But when it comes to the more concrete things, like about Europe needing to increase their, you know, defense budget or this, that, and the other. Number one, let's give a shout out to Salvini trying to get his stupid bridge made with the defense money. This was very brave. The Slovenians did a better
defense
job.
Us from dolphins.
Yeah. The Slovenians did a better job. They're fixing their highway system with their NATO money. They did a better job in their applications than you. But honestly, I think Europe should be interested in this. What you've learned from Trump is that America is not always going to be there. What kind of weird situations where some other country that you don't even know that well is in charge of your defense? That's crazy. Yeah, like I think countries like Poland who are like, we really want to make our own artillery shells. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think there are certain. I think even in a world of interdependence, you do want to be able to make certain things in your own country that you need, whether that's certain basic foodstuffs, whether that's other things. I think this is actually a healthy thing. To have some more of that. That being said, Europe should obviously pool things together to not replicate, to not be redundant, to not do this. But the idea that the United States will always be there is, I think, you know, a very clear fallacy. And in fact, and unfortunately, this isn't even how the world works, right? You guys have make some new fancy army. It's still going to be America and China dividing up the sea lanes and basically setting world prices, etc., like these kinds of things. So, like, not to sound like a war hawk, which I'm not, I actually think that Europe should consider some of these rearmament things as serious things in order deterrence, etc. But if you're going to do that, you can't be doing things like buying oil from Russia. Like, this stuff is crazy. Like, this stuff, this was like hugely embarrassing when the Ukraine war started and still is going on. Where it's like, well, we don't get as much now. You're like, wait a minute, is anyone in Europe like still? It's like, yeah, it turns out tons of Italian companies, right, get in trouble all the time. Luxury brands, other people doing, like, everybody's doing business with Russia, and that's literally paying for a war that you're on the other side of. What could be more self-defeating than this? Like, nothing. Like, war is already a destructive, horrible, counterproductive activity. When you're funding both sides of it, I don't know. This is a sin. This is something that is gravely, gravely wrong. And so I do think, like, the idea of where big supplies come from, where they need to go, why they are, does need to be thought out. I think Europe should be tougher about securing its own rare earth minerals, not relying on, US chip technology and stuff like this. I think, like, the way in which Europe, and whether this is just Ursula's fault or just the geopolitical reality, had to just fold like a table, like a cheap table. When I almost said Obama, my God, when Trump pushed his trade deal in, is, I think, emblematic of how difficult it is without real solidarity for Europe to stick up for any of these things and take advantage of any of the advantages it actually has.
So Putin obviously is winning the war on the ground, but between Putin and Zelensky, who's winning the media war? And the demonstration for Gaza on the other end were an extraordinary display of participation, maybe even people who couldn't locate the Middle East on a map, standing up for Palestinian life and self-determination. And this, in some ways, pushed some political leaders towards peace.
Definitely it did. And, I even met some folks recently who were campaigners who, like, all the stuff wasn't an accident. They were doing a lot of the hard work you do as social campaigner of who follows us. Can we do a collaboration? Oh, this teacher lives for Palestine. Let's support her. And sort of showing solidarity both ways really, really did work. It does show you, though, also a decentralized feel-good thing like that. When you don't have the specific goal, you have what's happened now, which is that the war is over. There's still active genocide by any definition happening in Gaza, and what's happening in the West Bank.
No genocide.
And what's happening in the West Bank is like really shattering, like really horrifically shattering. And of course, there is no inciting incident there other than an ongoing, horrible occupation. So the world doesn't care anymore and has permission to not care anymore. Similarly to the end of COVID, which, as you know, by any definition of when the pandemic was going to become not a pandemic, has not been reached. This thing still rips around the world, killing disabled people and creating killing vulnerable people and creating disabled people at an incredible rate, and nobody talks about it. The Germany, for instance, was only in recession last year because of people with days off from work for being sick, which is a direct result of an ongoing pandemic that we don't talk about. UK is the same way. So I think there are some of these, like, these back things that are, that aren't working. I also think in Ukraine, Zelensky was winning the kind of propaganda war at first, low expectations. Who is this guy? He's standing up for himself. This is great. He's demanding respect on the world stage. This is great. Look, you're either, when the war is near an end, you're either Churchill or you're de Gaulle. And Zelensky has more Churchill vibes than de Gaulle to me. Thank you. You were brave during the war, but now I need to fix my country, and I don't think that you're the guy. And if you look at, oh my God, and even so sort of what I thought was a very not ignorant, but just sort of getting the facts right, but getting the situation wrong from Euronews, I think it was. They just did a thing like, who would win the election if it was in Ukraine today? And they were like, well, he's not at 70% approval anymore because of all the scandals, but Zelensky would get 23, which doesn't seem like a lot, but which puts him double digits against the next highest guy, who's the former defense chief, the fellow who's the EU ambassador now. And then a military intelligence guy is in third place. And then probably like Poroshenko, some of these other guys or whatever. And you're like, no, that's the wrong answer. The person who would win if he gets 20% is unnamed Russian TikTok candidate is the one who's going to win. And so the situation that I think we find ourselves in with Ukraine and Russia, that I find myself extremely frustrated about, is even after spending a lot of blood and money and treasure and killing a lot of beautiful kids, as Trump would call them, and etc. Like, even on both sides, they are being forced into by Putin through Trump the idea that they have to have an election right away. It's even why Euronews is writing a story about this. And no one's asking why. Why do they have an election right away? Is it because no one in Ukraine is prepared for a savvy information warfare candidate sponsored by Russia who would clearly win extremely easily, in my opinion, this election, probably with double-digit victory? And if you can't win by the bullet, you win by the ballot. So all these things that they wanted to get, they'll be able to get this way.
Clear. Thank you. And there is another phenomenon very interesting, that is the disintermediation. Political leaders often try to avoid any form of intermediation. They hold a few press conferences, and they are either without questions, and that's a contradiction in terms, or without the possibility of follow-up questions. They just need a smartphone and a live broadcast to connect with their voters. And Meloni candidly told Trump that she avoids journalists. So how has political communication changed with social media, and do traditional media still have a role in democracy?
Yes. I mean, obviously, the kind of cliche answer is that since Obama and stuff we did there, politicians have a direct way to communicate with people and bypass the press. And this is true to some extent. You can force the press to deal with you because you're so popular they can't ignore you, etc. But the press are still the referees, more and more, where I see. They're still the ones deciding things. And the internet, TikTok, all of these things thrive on long format content that you cut up and play with, interact, react, remix, any number of things that you think are interesting to do. And so the people are still providing it are the mainstream news. It's interesting, your question, because it wasn't that recently, maybe a couple of years ago, and I think he's struggling now. But had a chance to interview Professor Chomsky about just some of these issues. And my co-interviewer, Julia, said, if you were writing manufacturing consent today, knowing about Facebook and YouTube, et cetera, what would you change? And he said, it's funny, you'd think people ask me this all the time, but nobody has asked me this. Maybe he says this all the time because he's a nice guy, I don't know. And then he, sat there thinking, and he said nothing, because the main purveyors of misinformation in America are still the New York Times, CNN, and Reuters. I think that's true. They're still, disinformation is still mostly effective when it's transmitted by trusted major broadcasting networks. And again, we fall in love with our own things, and now we fall in love with our own disinformation. And so we're like, how is all this disinformation getting around? You're like, what about your disinformation? For instance, American mainstream press has never debunked the beheaded babies story from the beginning of Gaza. The American mainstream press has never, any number of things that people know are not true, the press has never said anything about it. I can give you an even darker example, which is, one of the most popular alternative press figures in the US is, of course, Tucker Carlson. And you ask, why is this guy who's so unpleasant so popular, right? He has annoying rich kid vibes. He's got this very girlish kind of laugh. Everything about him is annoying. Why does he get so much respect from people? And the answer is because he's the only US journalist who ever apologized for the Iraq War. Whoever said, yeah, we thought we were doing the right thing. The government told us lies. We told them to you. That was wrong, and I'll never do it again. I'm sorry. Nobody says this kind of thing, So actually, I think sometimes we are just in love with our own disinformation, and so we forget that other people love their own disinformation the same way.
So these
people still believe there's like a P tape of like Trump, because it was fun, but it's not true.
There is even the bias of confirmation.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly. Better way to put it. Thank you. Yeah.
And so even, do you think that the content recommendations algorithms, again, artificial intelligence, do you think that they could determine people's votes in some ways? So social are obviously a place of polarization, leverage confirmation bias, create information bubbles.
Yeah. It's less the algorithm. The algorithm is just following the defects in our brain, which is, that we actually do like conflict, that we do sort of thrive on these things. I think some more transparency around algorithms would be interesting. Like, again, it's like we have sciencey people pretending to be doing something so interesting that it's more important for us to not know what they're doing than even have information about it. Like same with Cambridge Analytica. Like they would rather go to jail than let you and me know that they don't know what to do with 2 million pieces of information, because that sort of diminishes their power.
Models are even black box. So some models, even complex one, especially complex ones, are difficult to be interpreted. There are some mechanisms.
Especially with this AI stuff, right? But we don't have transparency on this. You have the opposite. So you have like basically smart people tell me that I'm wrong, that actually AI coding, artificial AI coding is quite good. You tell me you're an AI expert, so that that's not true. That even if you have AI code that somehow is okay and like makes your website work, that's not how code works. Code has to be like revised and taken back and made more and more elegant, which is the opposite of
human in the loop.
So what we're doing is making very bad code, the world based on very bad code that barely works and will have to be repaired all of the time. We're just making a bad system. Actually may even create more jobs because people will have to fix like little pieces of the internet like all day long because they're
the elegant way to say it is that machine learning operations. It's the elegant way.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I guess that's right. So I think that there is in some ways like we are letting these people sell us these lies. We have Sam Altman telling us that ChatGPT 6.0 is dangerous. It's not dangerous. That's a stupid thing to say. It's a stupid toy that doesn't work. It's not dangerous. We just have people who want to create a very unlikely capitalist monopoly. They want to be the people making the atomic bomb. We get infinite resources to make something so dangerous that no one else can be trusted to do it except for a handful of people. And we're letting them do it. So even if it's hard to understand, I do think we need transparency here. We need to rip down some of this stuff, let people see what it is, let people see sometimes that it's not even doing what they say it is. It's not even doing anything that interesting. I think it's very important to regulate tech, to make tech more transparent. And when it's not working, do what I said before, make a public option. Because for instance, Facebook, no one would be on Facebook if it was just about like watching videos. Like we go on Facebook because our kids are in school and we have a private Facebook group that's about their school. And we have a one for our like neighborhood that's like about shit that's going on in the neighborhood. If the government provided me with that, I might never go on Facebook again. I'm going to want to doom scroll. I might still go on, TikTok or something. But for instance, Facebook, I would never be there. So we need to make alternatives also.
Yes, I agree. And just to go on your story a little bit, how was your day-to-day work like during the Obama administration? Most memorable, impactful moment, the impact of West Wing Week, and did it anticipate the TikTok-style communication?
I think a bit. This sort of sentence by sentence way that I could edit it. For me, it was like a music video. Which is essentially what TikTok is. I write down narration so that I can just cut any video I want on top
and then only use these tiny little clips of Obama saying things. So in a way, it is like 20 TikToks put together as West Wing Week. I hadn't thought about it like it that way, but that is essentially what it is. And in terms of the ease of editing and performance, this is how you make a good TikTok, right? Like your politician, like Mamdani, you can imagine, right? He says one thing and then the camera angle changes and he says another thing and then he says another thing. And this is the style. But the actual invention of it was much more practical than that, which was there's only a certain number of people who fit with the president when he goes places. That's, you know, a certain number of people in a room, then it's a certain number of people on a plane, then a certain number of people who are in the cars, and then the smallest would be the helicopter, and then an elevator, you know, like who travels with him. And there's someone whose job it is to figure out who gets to be in that every single time. And so for me as the videographer in this kind of new digital world, imagine you were like a TikToker having to do this. I had to write for every one of those locations. I should be there because I want to cover this for history. And so when it's just the elevator, that's a really hard thing to justify, right? You know, it's really important I be in this helicopter, even though I don't know what's going to happen. It's really important I be in this. And so West Wing Week was actually an invention for me of saying, no, I have a weekly product, so I need to be in everything because I'm always making this product and it comes out every week. And if
it was even an excuse.
and if I don't, the audience is going to be really sad, you know? And this worked. They were like, that's a great idea. We should do that. And then it turned out that it was true because I missed it one week and people were angry. I was literally in Iraq shooting at the end of the war. You know, people were not cool with that. They were like, you still should have told us, you know, like every Friday morning is when I expect to get West Wing Week. So this was very successful, even because it kind of had this faux historical kind of newsreel flair to it, was shown in some kids' schools, which is quite a coup when you're, you know, working at the White House as a kind of historical record of what the president had done. And it also was, when you're a content creator amongst sort of people like that, it was helpful to have something that other people wanted their stuff in on. So I was never chasing people down after the first couple. I always had people coming to me saying, hey, we're doing this initiative at the State Department. Will you cover on West Wing Week? And so this was nice to kind of just sort of change the operation. So I think it does show you when you're making a TikTok or an Instagram thing, what I tell people now is the same thing as that. You can't make one, you have to make 10. You don't come up with an idea, you come up with an idea for a series, you know, whether it's subway takes or whatever. Like you have to have a sort of a simple idea that you can replicate over and over again because it makes it easier to make and it also makes it easier to consume. And this was 1,000% the case for West Wing Week.
Last question. We have a few time, but there are a series of concepts that you spoke about that were really interesting. For example, the importance of authenticity, the importance of nostalgia, how to create desires, how to earn audience attention, the conversion of voters into fans, and then last funny question. We have been institutional for all time, so I can stop faking it. So are there some example of political campaign moments or politician that you found particularly cringe, strange, or inappropriate? To close it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I'm thinking of the worst one, and you can find it now still, is in the German election, the Green Spitzen candidate, Robert Habeck, their candidate for chancellor. He didn't do a rap. He was next to an influencer who was doing a rap, but like wearing chains and looking tough. And to me, this was especially cringy because if you're going to do something lame, you should do it. Show me you have the guts to fucking be the guy doing the lame thing. You know, don't have some influencer next to you doing it, right? Oh, this is crazy. The other one that I would that I did mention already was this Kamala Harris Obama endorsement phone call. But actually, I want to give the absolute prize of the cringiest video of the last couple years of elections to, again, the Harris campaign. But this was following a trend and it kind of fell short. This was, you know, the show The Bear. It's a restaurant show in the US. It's about a restaurant in Chicago. And there's a handsome guy who's the lead protagonist. And he was feeding a piece of pizza to Stephen Colbert on late night TV. And this was a trending thing because it was nice. These two men were feeding each other in a world of toxic masculinity. It's really nice to have two people feeding each other. Then on the Harris campaign, you had Liz Plank, who's a feminist influencer, on her knees being fed a Dorito by Gretchen Whitmer, who is the governor of Michigan. And this was really weird, really weird. And she had to actually apologize for giving communion with a Dorito, you know, to a woman on her knees. And I think it also shows, talking about before, it's like, you know, we think they're the scary ones and that we're the normal ones. We also think that they're the weird ones, you know, JD Vance fucks couches. But then we make like videos like this and expect voters to understand that we're normal people. So it's like, how can you follow trends but make them not cringy? Is maybe alchemy more than science, but you do see people doing it right all the time. You know, like in Germany, the most famous kind of trending clip like that is an old astrological clip in which a guy calls to an astrologer and asks, he's like, I have skin cancer. Will I get an appointment to see my dermatologist this year? And she goes, no, sorry. You know, good luck looking at the cards. And so you had Delinka parliamentarians doing their own astrological readings about, will Frederick Merz ever develop empathy? Well, the cards are dark, but nope, good luck. Sorry. You know, like, now that's a trend that everyone can participate in. You don't have to sort of live your life online, know a bunch of extra rules, you know, participate in this culture that's not yours.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your evening and thanks for your time.
Sure. It was a pleasure. Take care now.
Bye.